Hi, Jan Carson. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me, Naomi.
Um, I do a little introduction. So, you're the author of quite a few things, but predominantly the Firestarters, which came out
Spartan
last
Words.
year,
Yeah.
which is superb. I loved it. So, if you're into novels and not short stories, take yourself along and have a read of that. But you're also shortlisted for the BBC National Short Story Award for your story. I'm going to read this so I get the title right. In the Car with the Rain Coming Down. Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
And we're going to chat a little bit more about the story. Can we start with, it's about a family picnic. And I just wondered where the idea came from. So where you start with a story and whether this was like a normal way into the story for you or whether it was something different.
Yeah, well, I actually don't have an awful lot of confidence as a short story writer, so this whole shortlisting has been incredibly good for my confidence. I'm more of a novelist, really, and I was working about 2 years ago on the next novel, which is coming out next summer, and it's set in a kind of rural environment close to where I grew up as a child, and I've in the past I've always had quite a lot of time to write a novel. With this one, it had to be quite quick, and so to help me get into the characters really quickly, I wrote a rake of short stories about the characters and the kind of local environment around there. Just exploring kind of. I live in a city now. It's a long time since I've been in a rural community, and this is one of the stories which came out of that kind of exploring that like rural environment project.
Oh, that's exciting. So we're going to see these characters again next year.
Well, these guys aren't, these ones in particular aren't in, they didn't make the cut for the novel, sadly. I had to, there was about 5 characters that got cut out, which is always really horrible because you feel like you're murdering real people by that stage. But that environment, the kind of space that they come from is definitely there.
I thought what was really interesting about it was the family, because really it's about family tension rather than the fact that they're going on a picnic. And they've got this really interesting sort of pecking order, which I guess I recognise that. And I'm from a much smaller family, but still you recognise that sense of where you fit in and who's the matriarch and who gets away with things. And I just wondered whether the dynamics of that family came as you were writing or whether you'd worked out who was going to take which role in that.
Um, this is really awful. I hope my mother's not listening to this, but a lot of it is just lifted from growing up. I'm from quite a small family, but we did have quite a large extended family community and friend community, and that is something that I've observed over and over and over again. So that none of the characters are specifically based on real people, but they're kind of a composite of lots of, particularly the women that I observed growing up. The Irish writer John Montague has this poem which I love called like Dolmens Round My Childhood, the old people, about the kind of old people that shaped his earliest memories. And it was very similar for me, but quite often it was a lot of these matriarch figures. My mum's a great cook, and I spent a lot of time in church kitchens and farmhouse kitchens, and you get a real sense of these strong women in there. So I guess that's where some of the pecking order stuff came from.
I love that, as all the conversations about the sponge cake and what was going to happen to this fresh cream. It felt very real, and even the going on a picnic in the rain, because that was very much part of my childhood as well.
Yeah.
That when you mentioned Conway Castle, I was like, yes, I've done that one. When you're thinking about the details, do they come later or do you write those? Does it come in a sort of chronology, or do you go back and think, particularly when you've got such a big cast of characters like
Yeah.
this? Did you go in afterwards and think I need to make so and so memorable and add this, or?
I guess 2 things. First of all, I do most of my writing in my head before I ever sit down at the computer. So I'm a furious walker. I'm not particularly fast, but I plod around East Belfast all the time, thinking about my stories and my characters. So it's quite often quite late in the creative process before I'll sit down to actually write them. And by that stage, they do feel quite real. And the other thing is I kind of call it a wave method of writing. I think I've heard Zadie Smith writes like this as well, so I feel a bit reassured that I'm not mad doing this. But each day that I sit down to write, I'll begin at the start of the story or the chapter, and I will kind of edit what I've got so far and then add in about another 500 or 1,000 words. And it feels like you're getting to know the characters then in a kind of slow, measured way, and adding in little details. Oh, I could flesh that out a wee bit more, and she might say something funny there. And It's also great for editing, because by the time you get to the end of the story, you've maybe done 16, 17 edits already. So my editor, I think, quite appreciates that as well.
Do you work in the same way when you're writing a novel? Because that's quite an intensive way of doing it.
Yeah, but like with chapters, so I would start at the beginning of each new chapter every day. So my chapters are usually about the same length as a short story, so maybe 7,000 words. It's a slow way to write, but usually it means when I get to the end of 100,000 word novel, I've already done quite a few edits on it, and it feels, I'm not very good at showing people a work in progress. So if I can show something that I'm reasonably happy with, it reassures me a wee bit.
Great. Can I ask as well about some of the various characters in there? So you've got this character who's a lesbian. She's the girlfriend of one of the characters, and she's kind of the incomer. And she seems to suggest that there might be a shift in dynamics coming. And I wondered whether that was a deliberate thing on your part to sort of, because we're with the narrator who wants to make this announcement at the picnic. And so there's this idea that actually, even though things don't shift as far as they might have done, that might be coming. And I wondered also whether that related to the shift in Northern Ireland around LGBTQ rights, or whether I'm reading more into it than you were thinking about at that point.
I guess all of those things are kind of in your subconscious when you're writing. So even though, I would never set out to write a story about an issue, but a lot of issues and, current cultural and social issues, that they're in the back of your head when you're writing. So I do think they begin to bleed out into your work. And I guess with that kind of storyline, I wanted to think about something which I've been thinking about a lot in my nonfiction writing for the last 2 years. This idea of change and progress in particular takes a long time. And we've seen that very much in Northern Ireland over the last 20 years. You don't go from signing the Good Friday Agreement to everything being dandy overnight. There's a period of change and people realigning their opinions and getting to know people who are different from them and challenging assumptions from the past. And I think particularly that's where the mother and father character are. They're probably not right at the end of entirely enlightened when it comes to LGBT issues, but they are not over here where they were 15, 20 years ago going, I'm out, this is all awful. So I wanted to kind of pay homage to that. Like, for a lot of people, that progressive change is slow and it's long and it's hard. Actually, if you bear with people in that process of change, they're much more likely to stay at the place that they have come to. It's not a kind of just paying lip service to progress. They actually feel it in their bones, kind of thing.
Yeah, there's a lovely moment when the narrator's surprised that the mum's realised knows anything really about LGBT culture. It's really, I'm not going to spoil it for anyone who hasn't read it, but it's really nice. So two other things that I wanted to ask you. One was, did you celebrate when you found out you were on the list, and how did you celebrate?
So this has been really strange for me, Naomi. I have lived by myself the whole way through lockdown, and about halfway through I won another literary prize for the fire starters, and it was the most, oh my goodness, it was awful, because there was this moment where you're online and it's all celebration, and then I closed my laptop and there was no one. It was like the saddest I've ever felt in my life, I think. So with this, we knew a little bit ahead of time, and when the announcement was made, I made sure that I had some people around me. So I was actually with my family, and they're none of them are artists or writers, so they don't really know what they're celebrating, but they did a really good job of being excited for me.
I'm glad there was someone there. That's really nice. And who are your favourite short story writers? Who do you look to?
Oh gosh, that's a really dangerous question to ask. I have them split into kind of dead and not dead camps. So my not dead favourite short story writers are, I love George Saunders. I just worship George Saunders. I think he's amazing. I also love the American writer Karen Russell. I think she's got a new book coming out this week, actually. And for the dead writers, I love Flannery O'Connor and Shirley Jackson. So that's where my dark heart probably comes from, the pair of them. I think they are incredible at cutting right to the bone of the human condition, and you see it across all of their work. So somewhere in the middle of all of that muddle is where I would quite like to fall.
That's a pretty good place to
Yeah.
end up. Thank you for joining me, Jan, and good luck. The story's fantastic. So if you are looking to read it, it's been read on BBC 4. I hope I've got that right. There'll be links below, and also Comma Press have published the anthology, so you can buy all 5 stories together. Thanks, Jan.
Thank you.